which is somebody stripped down a 36 Chevy standard coupe, right? And my buddy bought the rolling chassis for it. And like, I don't need all these 30 Chevy mechanical parts because I just want the frame, really. So he kept the frame and he wanted to rehome the parts. And I'm the guy that's like, give me your poor, you're orphaned, you're sick, anything pre-war mechanical that I feel like I might be able to salvage, or at least can just look like is aesthetically pleasing to me and I'll enjoy having around as it rusts back into the ground. I'm the guy that takes it. But of course, these things all have themes, right? So I've got this, I've got my Model T pile, which is like everything I need to do like an early 30s style Model T / Model A gow job kind of thing, because somebody dropped off a big pile of T junk at work one day, and they're like, "Hey, Dave, you've got T ambitions. Take all this stuff home with you." And I was like, "All right, I'll take that." In fact, that's from that pile. This, I can't point at things right. This Model T door with the Musco sign screwed. It didn't have the Musco sign on it at the time. Of course, I added that, but yeah, like never turn down cool junk is my motto. But anyway, yeah. So I've got. And I got my headlamp elope coming together. Have I told you guys about my headlamp elope?
What headlamp elope?
Yeah, so, you know what an antelope, like a moose head or whatever on your wall, like a mount.
Yeah.
I've got a 29 Ford radiator shell and a 3031 headlamp bar and a pair of Guide 682 headlamps. You know, the ones with the cool Art Deco marker lamps on the top, mounted on there, and a Model A horn. Like a trophy. Oh, and there's a 46 Michigan license plate hung on that from the. But it's all functional. Like I'm wiring it up so that you can, it'll all go through the amp gauge. Like originally, I'm going to use a Model A terminal box and cloth wiring because it's all going to be exposed. You'll be able to push a button and honk the horn in your face if you want, and turn the headlights on high and low beams. And I've got a turn signal stuff. Like, it's my vicarious way of enjoying restoring a Model A without actually having a Model A. So, and it'll be cool art, and I can use a battery tender and turn it into a battery, refresh station. At least that's my excuse, and not just that it's cool art that I want on my garage wall. Yeah.
That's a nice idea. Yeah. But it's the same reason I've got the 1924 Chevy chassis sitting in the backyard up on blocks awaiting the Speedster build, right? I've got this really cool all copper gas tank that I found. I assume probably off like a fire chief's car is what I'm going to guess. But found it for way too cheap on Marketplace and just had to drive up into Ohio a little bit to buy it. And yeah, it's going to be a pretty cool Speedster when I get around to it and get everything set up. But like you, Dave, there's a lot of things going on between now and that. So,
yeah, well, I'm never lacking. Sometimes I just go in the basement and look at my cool stash of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I've got a 32 Ford steering wheel down here. I can come down and hold on to it whenever I want. I don't have the whole 32 Ford, never will, but.
I just, as you're telling that story and you're talking about your pile of Model T parts, just to say, welcome everybody to No Driving Gloves. We just kind of rolled with it. We were having great conversation. We figured we'd just jump into the podcast. But you're talking about your pile of Model T parts, and then your, Chevy parts, and then your 35 Chevy steering wheel and all of this. All of a sudden, I got a picture of a car collection in the middle of the woods, or say Arizona, and it's like piles of anthills. But it's I look at my Model T and it's just the pile of parts, and look at my Model A and it's just the pile of parts, and everything's there if you just put it together. Think about, getting a model kit, your tester's model kits that you're going to glue together. You just open the boxes and you dump the stuff on your mantle. You get another one, dump it. Look at this, my Rat Fink model. Just,
Well, and you've hit on part of why I insist on building this thing on the wall that's going to do nothing but amuse me with its buttons and lights and horn, is because it's a good excuse to own this stuff right now, because now it's art, which, part of the reason you own a full Model A is it's cool to look at as well as fun to drive and interesting to work on. And so here I get those things. I just don't get to drive it around and let the wind blow through my hair but I've got the Corvair for that. And I've certainly got a lot of real car work that I need to put into that because I would like to be driving it more as time approaches. And this will be my fourth season with it. I got it in the spring of 21, and it needs some things. It just needs some attention from me to keep doing what it does. And really the thing that I need to do and have been putting off because it's not really fun or glamorous is I need to fix the heater fan, because the blower fan doesn't come on when you flip the switch. And the crummy thing about a Corvair is all of that stuff is way in the back, so there's a lot of places that can go wrong between that dash switch and the actual blower motor. So we'll see, but that's just a matter of time, patience, and a willingness to get dirty, which it's been too cold, but I can feel spring on its way.
Yeah, the pile of parts things, something that crossed my mind today as I was walking through a store, and maybe you're familiar with this, Derek, maybe Roblox, or what's the Minecraft, where everything's built in cubes.
My kids,
I'm familiar with Minecraft, but not Roblox.
Is that where the Lego's getting their designers from? Or these kids coming straight out of Minecraft school? Because you see all these Lego kits of cars and stuff. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they actually looked like the cars. They would custom make pieces so they would look like the cars. And now they all look like, I was looking at one today. It was kind of remote control, and it was a Porsche GT4, which is the Cayman, and not the Cayman, the Cayman.
The SUV thing?
No, that's the Cayman. That's
Cayenne.
The Cayman's
that's Cayenne.
The mid-engine hardtop, like the Boxster. And it looked, I had to stand there and stare at the box to even get a concept of what remotely looked like it, because it was all blocky. It's just something. I put it on the topic list. I really didn't think it would be a big conversation. But
I bet I know what's going on there.
Huh?
I bet that somebody in their marketing team said, why are we bothering to try to disguise this as something that is not Lego, when that's actually the selling point here, is that we're selling you a Lego kit. And if you wanted something that was more realistic, you'd go out and buy a real model, like either a scale replica or a gas-powered RC car or something. Well, I made Derek mad. He's leaving. Oh, crap. I'm sorry.
The problem I see, the old ones were great. And maybe you're right that, hey, this is Lego. But about 2 years ago, well, I'm going to say it had to be 5 years ago, because Mary Ryan was around. Amanda and I looked for a Lego set that wasn't specific. When they sell it to you now, it's going to look like this. And if you're lucky, it'll come with instructions so that you can build 3 different things out of the kit. And back when I got Legos, you just got 500 Legos and you built something out of it. And we looked and looked and looked and couldn't find that kit. And then a few years ago, I started to see Lego kits that were just bricks, and you could create using your imagination, because I guess nobody's got imagination to create things out of Legos anymore. And now we've got these hideous Konasigs and things that are supposed to look like Formula One cars. And we've got one that looks like some Picasso piece of art that when you snap everything together, and they have their complete botanicals now. You can get bonsai plants and bouquets of roses out of Legos. And
wow.
And guess what? A dozen roses is cheaper than the 4 roses you get in a Lego set. It's like $100 or something for the Lego set. Granted, they don't go bad, or die.
Yeah, exactly. You don't ever have to buy them again. You just buy the one shot, build it, boom, roses forever. And you said Picasso's involved, so that's fitting because it's just cubism.
Well, and I think the other thing that's at play here with all of that is that the core customer for Lego hasn't changed. They've just gotten older. So they're still marketing to like millennial kids, but now they're in their 40s. They're like, here's that pirate ship you remember. We tweaked it a little bit, but we're willing to sell it to you again. Because I've seen that stuff, and I've gone, oh, cool. I remember
Well,
that.
you
We played
could
a matchup hybrid of space and Lego, or a space and
Mhm.
pirate.
you could be right because they have the Lego sets right now that are the Atari, look like an Atari 2600 or a
Oh, yeah.
Polaroid camera or a Smith Corona typewriter, or
That's
it's
Gen X nostalgia, but same deal. Yeah, absolutely.
actually, I might have saw one that looked like an Xbox. I could be wrong at a Target, but it's always a challenge for me. Which aisle do I walk down the toy aisle? Because I'm only going to walk down one. Am I going down the Hot Wheel aisle or am I going down the Lego aisle?
If you browse the toys, it's weird, but if you just pass through it, it's okay. Is that the?
Yeah. Well, that's all I had to say about Legos.
Ah,
Well, I could go on for about toys because, like, I loved toys as a kid, and I feel like toys hit their peak, like a lot of things in our culture, right about 2000, 1996 to 2000. Like the toys, but I was just thrown out of them. Like I was like, I can't play with these things. I'm 17 years old. I can't play with these things, but damn, they're cool. I can't wait to have kids. And then I had
Oh,
kids,
no.
and the toys are lame again.
See, I'm going to argue toys were better in my era because we had the Lego sets that you could create with. I had the Erector set that came with 8,000 parts, and you created whatever you want. You could, I think the one I had came with a booklet, but there were like 40 different things you could build. I could build a tow truck, and it had an electric motor that plugged in and then a transmission so you could reverse and raise things and make cranes, and those were the cool toys. And then I'd go to my grandparents that still had my dad's old toys, and his Erector set was even better than my Erector set.
Oh, 50s toy. Oh God, the 50s were such a great toy heyday. I mean, like Christmas from 1947 to 1957 must have just been an incredible time, at least if you came from a wealthy enough household. I mean, between the Lionel stuff and the toys and the models.
wait. My favorite, chemistry sets that came with radioactive material.
Hey, why not?
Yeah.
Well, I was just listening to a podcast. They were talking about something that was sold in the 50s that in order for it to glow, it was a very radioactive, one of the most radioactive things on the planet.
Clocks and watches were used radium for the glow.
Yeah.
That's the whole Radium Girls story.
Yeah, but maybe that was it. Maybe they were talking about a watch that did that. But the radium had a half-life of like 14 years or something. So now the watch wouldn't kill you and it'd be cool to wear, but it wouldn't glow either. But
I have one and it doesn't glow. I can vouch for that. Mine's my grandfather's Belova A11, which is the original Air Corps hack watch from World War II. So, when they all synchronized their watches at the beginning of the bomber mission, except there's an old joke that I can't tell because it's too early in the evening about bomber pilots and the size of their watches. And
are you kidding? The first word our listeners heard tonight was strip. So,
oh boy.
So how can it be too early?
Oh, well, the joke then I will tell you, which is the joke is how can you tell the bomber pilot in the shower? Because he's the one with the big watch and the little thingamajig. Yeah. So now, and men's watches have gotten ludicrous. Like a World War II men's fighter pilot watch looks like a lady's watch in this day and age because everybody's wandering around with a clock on their wrist. Like this, I'm not wearing my watch, but like, my $50 size watch, a little bit smaller, is ludicrously small compared to the average
I've got
wall hanger.
I've got this Seiko that.
See, there you go. You club a guy to death with that.
It's thick. It's not. It's like 38 millimeter. And so it's not even as big as it can be. And I'm on a group that's watches and automobiles, and this guy, he's got some sort of rat rod, and he popped up his watch, and it literally was half of his arm in length and hung off the sides of his arm. And doesn't have dainty little wrists like I do. This guy actually has muscles and had thick arms. So I totally agree with you. Watches have gotten outrageous. I ordered one last night. I was gifted for high school graduation, a Gucci 3000M, and this is 1990 era, and this thing's like 36 millimeter and wafer thin, and it became lost over the years, and I really regretted it. And I found one the other night that was new in box, still had all the packaging on it, the plastic on it, new in box with tags, and I ordered it. I had to have it just kind of to replace, because I found them before and they're always scratched up and stuff. And this one was a good deal. So I'm going to have that again, but I'm just going, like you said, it's so small and dainty. It's not the watch of the era. I mean, I love wearing this Seiko, but the mechanical Timex I got for Christmas from Brandy is smaller. It doesn't have the weight, but I love it too. It's
well, and with everybody carrying a modern pocket watch, i.e. their smartphone in their pocket these days, like simply wearing a wristwatch is a bit of an accessory, although I'll admit that I've got the built-in muscle memory from the pre-smartphone era still intact. So I look at my wrist first and grab for the phone second.
Yeah, here I am. I'm standing in an office with 2, 4, 6, 7 monitors, 2 3D printers, two actual printers, 5 computers, and can go on the list. And I don't own an Apple Watch. I love my analog, and I don't care if it's quartz or mechanical. I love my watch, and I just can't bring myself to go to a smartwatch. I even saw one the other day on Facebook, so God only knows how it really looks. That's digital. It's digital, and it'll have a Rolex face, and then it'll go to the Android stuff. That see, Derek's more technological.
That's what I've got
than me.
I'm not saying I love it, but it's okay. I can change the watch face, make it look like what I want to, but it still doesn't beat my other, analog watches and all that. They're much just the mechanicalness of them, right? That's what it's all about.
Car guy question for you on that thing you're wearing. Can it be a speedometer? I.e., if you're clipping along and you're 490 and you want to know how fast you're going, can you like bring up the GPS on that and say, "Oh, here I am. I'm doing 32 or whatever"?
To be true, tell you the truth, yes, there is a way to do it. I have not taken the time to figure it out. There is a way to put the GPS on the watch, and it will show you kind of like on your screen a very close up of where you are on the map, and it will read out directions, and I believe it does tell you your speed as well.
Can you set a speed warning so it's like, "Oh, slow down, Harold"?
Possibly, I don't know.
It vibrates your arms.
I don't have time
to shake.
Yeah, it just starts to give you a vibration warning.
So,
see, Dave, I've got one that you can do exactly what you asked too. It's a chronograph, and I can start the little stopwatch on it and time it for precisely a mile, and I'll know how fast I'm going. And
I got too much other stuff going on. I'm driving a Chevy 490. I got the Spark Advance and non-synchrotrans. I can't be timing myself against landmarks. Good Lord.
Well, then he's going to time himself and against a mile landmark, and then he's going to get his abacus out and start doing the math. And
please, slide rule.
That's too modern. I do everything.
Slide rule is too modern. Come on, you got to go to the abacus.
You only do it with the new math. Does the abacus work with the new math?
I don't know.
But hang on. I'm not that ancient. Like I've always claimed to be just an early 20th century guy. I'm not like, Ming period China or anything here.
I've got a slide rule somewhere in this office. I have everything. I just don't know.
Good for you.
I wouldn't know how to use one, honestly, but it is a skill I'd like to acquire. It's sort of like the telegraph lineman's tie or whatever. One of those things that you don't really need to know how to use at this day and age, but it's cool to say you can.
I have that poster that says, basically, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I had the perfect example pop up this week. And I was in a store, actually it was on a Walmart, and they had a one of those scooter things that you rest your knee on, and if you've got a bad knee or had knee surgery or foot surgery, and you scoot around with, and it was like on clearance for like $25. And I go, I ought to buy that because I know I'm going to need it at some point. It's new in box, blah, blah, blah. And I said no. And then somebody I know fell and broke their foot this week, and now they need one. And, of course, their copay on their insurance and everything's going to be more than what that would have cost for $25. And I've got room in storage. I could have bought it and kept it. So there's one of those examples. If I would have bought it, I would have had it, and I not needed it at that point, but now I need it, but I don't have it. So just always live with that rule.
It's a good song too.
Own everything.
Hi, Neil.
What song?
So Disapproving Cat called us out on the half-life of radium. So I don't know why my grandfather's watch doesn't glow anymore, but I can say that I can bring that around to two things which I thought of, which is I wonder why we measure watches metrically like that. But I wonder if it's because similarly to why we measure spark plugs in metric sizes, which is before World War I, the French were the leaders in technology, so they were the ones that were good at ignition systems. So we used their spark plugs.
But actually, the most advanced at spark plugs now was Germany with Bosch. The Bosch system
before
was
World War I?
most advanced. Yeah, Bosch was the most advanced before World War I.
Oh, well, Albert Champion begs to disagree or whatever, but
well, they were probably equally advanced.
Yeah, it was good enough for the U.S. market to import them, and maybe Germany wasn't doing enough exporting at that time to the United States as far as auto technology. Although Mercedes sold well here, but the other reason I bring that up is because of,
I was going to say, you don't have to worry about that. There's this guy that's on TV almost every day, and I'm pretty sure he's going to take care of this millimeter thing on watches and spark plugs too, and make them all standard.
Oh boy. Well, thank God I'm already familiar. Okay, Neil, the science teacher, is explaining to us that if the watch was glowing because of radioactivity, it would be blue rather than green. So that's like when the Demon Core slipped together at Los Alamos and killed all those people twice. Some people claimed they saw a blue flash at that time. Wow, we're learning all kinds of things in the comments tonight about watches. But the reason I brought spark plugs up is I have a polonium tipped spark plug. Do you have one of those as well, Derek? I think everybody's got one.
No, I need to. I do not have much of a spark plug collection. I need to build one. And yes, I would love some radioactive spark plugs in my collection.
But polonium has a really short half-life, doesn't it? Comment section. Isn't that why polonium spark plugs are more of a gimmick than anything that was really going to help your combustion chamber, but are perfectly safe to have on your.
This is terrible because one of my major areas of study in my background is chemistry, and I can't remember any of this.
Oh, I got A's in chemistry in high school, but I am responsibility free when it comes to higher education and the sciences. The half-life of polonium is 138 days. So our 1930 era Firestone spark plugs with the polonium dipped tips or whatever they weren't radioactive much after the first year and a half. One wonders if they actually had any effect on combustion when they were absolutely fresh.
From everything I have read, absolutely no impact on ignition. It was just the fact that radiation was so in vogue. Yeah. Now, Neil says polonium may cause a better spark, maybe. But from everything I've read from the period, there we go, Disapproving Cat, it was just the gimmick of, radioactive.
Yeah. Well, they had radium water in a slightly earlier period than that. I mean, I don't think those dangers were really well understood until everybody screwed around and found out in that era. And I guess we thank them for their sacrifice.
Is this the toy you were talking about, Derek? The Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab, which was an actual radioactive toy and learning set sold in the early 50s. This $49.50 toy, that's a lot of money in 1950, came with four samples.
Yeah, it was radioactive.
Came with 4 samples of uranium-bearing ores, autunite, torbonite, uraninite, and carnotite.
Urana what?
As well as a Geiger-Müller radiation counter and various other tools.
I was such a Cold War radiation nerd as a kid. Like I had Edward Teller's book, like describing how to survive a nuclear war and all this stuff. Like I was the perfect demographic for Fallout before Fallout came out, and then I was out of games by the time it did. But anyway, I wanted a Geiger counter so bad. My only vestige of that period is I still have my Fallout shelter sign that was on my door in college and is now on my son's door, who just got into college today.
And looking this up,
Rock on.
I'm trying to find the date here. I don't see the date.
Drinking some radium water there?
No, this is just good old Lake Bascom groundwater.
Oh, all right.
I don't see the date of the auction, but the AC Gilbert Company,
They were big train makers back in the day.
U-238 Atomic Energy Lab Kit, the most dangerous toy in history. Fewer than 5,000 examples were produced with, and it amazes me. It only sold for $4,800.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, probably nobody's got nostalgia for that because it wasn't a widely selling toy in the era. So you'd have to be kind of a nerd for the era to really want that. So probably there just was not that many people with money competing with one another to get it.
I would say, though, if you were atomic energy or Cold War or any of that stuff, I would see this being a desirable toy just because of the rarity and the potential stupidity of producing it. Could you see if Hasbro came out with something like this? The Speak and Spell or the Speak and Glow, whatever, and it you point into it, and you pull the little cord, and it would spin around and point to something, and then it would tell you about this radioactive element. What would be the lawsuits in I'm just thinking back to the days where you could have asbestos and uranium and everything in schools. And
these days, the lawsuits would be very short in a lot of jurisdictions because activist judges have made it open and obvious. You gave your kid a radioactive toy, you lose. Doesn't matter that it was placed on the market as a toy. You were the one that was stupid.
Well, it's like I had a conversation a few years ago with actually, I'm going to say an ex-girlfriend, and I'm thinking you guys might actually fall into the same age category. Did you ever have the opportunity to play with mercury in school?
No, that was well understood to be too dangerous by the time I was a kid. My father-in-law recalls breaking open thermometers to play with the mercury inside, and he graduated high school in the 70s. So.
See, I remember doing that in like second or third grade, where we would break open thermometers and we'd get our little ball of mercury, and you'd roll them around and you'd throw the balls at each, or push the balls at each other, and then they would become a bigger ball. And she could have not believed that we actually played with mercury.
Were you guys?
I was in that. I was in the group that Dave came with, and yeah, I did not get to play with mercury in school, but I may or may not have a vial of it around.
Derek makes his own felt hats.
I have mercury thermometers. I know I use mercury thermometers up and through high school.
I'm not saying thermometers. I didn't say thermometers. But you have to remember, Dave, you have to remember, I'm a clock guy. There were mercury weights in clocks. And occasionally, if I have a clock with a mercury weight that has issues. Sometimes you need to, correct the weight of the mercury. If, the clock has been damaged or anything like that, there's things you have to do to fix it. So I have my reasons.
Now, anybody who's watched the podcast S-Town knows all about that, or listened to the podcast S-Town, Derek, knows all about that.
I am in the group.
Well, I don't listen to S-Town, so
you really should. It's a fascinating story. The guy that kind of narrated it is actually doing a presentation in a week or two locally, because it's a true story, and it took place maybe 15 miles, 20 miles from where I'm at, and 5 miles from where I used to live with said ex-girlfriend who couldn't believe about the mercury. And the director of the museum, when I used to work at Barber's, he's the one who put me on the podcast, because he actually drove by the McElroy farm, or or whatever the main character is, the farm is, to go to his house. So it's a really fascinating story. I can't say too much.
All right. Well, S-Town, we'll listen to it. All right.
It's 8 episodes. It's actually one of the most popular podcasts, and it was supposed to become a movie, but there's all kinds of, after you listen to it, you'll know all the legal stuff that's screwing it up. I'm surprised the podcast ever got released.
It's amazing all the dangerous things that are out there. I mean, the guy that made his own nuclear reactor at home got all the radioactive material out of smoke alarms, didn't he? Just collected like hundreds or thousands of discarded smoke alarms.
I think it was smoke alarms. Yeah, I vaguely
remember. It was in a
that.
weird element too, like Americanium or something. So yeah, I mean, you can get into a lot of danger if you want to. I mean, just climb into an electrical substation with a screwdriver sometime, poke around. You get into a lot of trouble in the world.
Can I find this real quick?
Yeah, come on, just use a paper clip and a 220 outlet.
Yeah. Neil mentions torque wrenches as dangerous toys, and all I could think of was Dominic Toretto beating that guy to death, or almost to death, with the torque wrench in The Fast and the Furious, which is
Neil is right.
Total abuse of a fairly precision tool, if you ask me.
Yeah, but you can recalibrate it. I mean, they just take it to snap. If it's a snap-on, you just take it to the truck and they recalibrate it. Come on.
I will say, though, if you were calculating a legal defense, to be saying, well, see, I wouldn't have normally picked up a torque wrench to beat a guy, but it was a moment of passion, so I can only be tried for manslaughter. Could be. I mean, but if you're too obvious about the calculations, that turns it into first degree, right?
I would say, so you can argue that if it was premeditated, you wouldn't have chose a torque wrench. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but then you can go too far and be like, well, he picked up the torque wrench to make it look like,
premeditated, that you would use the torque wrench so it didn't look like you premeditated it. Whoa.
Right, like, so if you posted on Facebook, if I was going to beat a guy to death, I'd use a torque wrench so it wouldn't look premeditated, and then you did it, then they'd come back and say, well, look, you posted that on.
I'm going to pop this image up here.
That's good, because we've clearly run out of things to talk about.
You're going to pop some tags.
That's
talking about Macklemore's farm.
When I was doing...
he brought up Macklemore Farm.
Oh, I see. Wow.
When I was doing the AI-generated podcast artwork for tonight, I wanted a vintage car, and what's behind me is what we got. This is actually the first image it popped up with, and I'm going, Lame. But now here we are, keep talking about radioactivity and plutonium, and it wanted me to do this Back to the Future-esque front engine DeLorean. I'm going, maybe.
But wait, can you pull up the picture that is the background you have tonight? Because I have a question for Dave here.
Okay, the hot rod.
Give me just a second. I can do it, but I can't necessarily let you see everything else that's on that page. Give me a sec.
I'm just wondering if Dave has the same thought I have about what that hot rod looks like from our past. See if he remembers.
I could probably go grab that magnet off of my garage door right now.
Yep.
Yeah, that looks like Steve Hatcher's Highboy.
Doesn't
That
it?
was a cool car. Steve did a good job on that car.
That's the problem with AI, is it takes images and sometimes changes them. I bet you it took that image up from somewhere. And
yeah, well, and I mean, in fairness, there are hundreds of fenderless 32 Fords with overhead valve V8 engines in them, and skinny bias ply tires these days. Although the bias ply tires is a fairly recent change. I mean, until when we were kids, you would only have seen that image with big, fat, wide radials on it, like a quasi Pro Street kind of look.
And there's the other image that came up for tonight that I rejected, which I might still use in the future.
I like that, the drifting. I really want to see old cars driven hard, like whether it's vintage rally car or setting up some kind of trials event or a rally cross style thing. Like, I just want to see people on bias plies throwing mud and having fun in both directions.
But that's what we need. We need a group of us to get together and have trials here in the US. To me, it's the one thing that is missing in the US is trials racing.
I agree. And we've got lots of venues that would be good for it. It's just that nobody has put truly antique cars on those. I mean, even vintage rallying is all based on European models. I mean, Escorts and stuff. And I'm like, somebody needs to throw a Rambler or a Falcon.
Well, Derek, you and I know somebody who runs a racing series now in kind of a remote area where this could and he's into hot rods, vintage cars, has a restoration degree, long beard.
Billy Gibbons.
Maybe we should talk about. We should.
But here's the thing. Well, number one, Neil just said, Dave, didn't they once race cars on the beaches in Florida? Yes, I mean they raced and
Daytona. I mean,
Ormond Beach, Daytona. Yeah, Ormond, Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
And
they started that.
They also raced. They raced on a lot of the East Coast, actually.
Yeah, Old Orchard Beach, Wildwood was raced on. I was just talking to a buddy about Brass Air racing on Wildwood this afternoon. Old Orchard has talked about bringing it back because they saw the success of Trog. Yeah, any place that there's hard-packed sand along the ocean like that, somebody has tried to go fast there, because before there were access to the dry lakes and the salt flats out west, that was how you set a speed record. So, like, you know, William K. Vanderbilt set the world speed record in 1904 at Daytona Beach in a Mercedes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, they all went out to the Ormond Daytona Beach was probably the biggest, I would say. Little fact: the Hotel Ormond Cup from the Hotel Ormond Challenge, the very first race on Ormond Daytona Beach. If you would like to see the original trophy that was won by Alexander Whitten, it is in the collection at the Crawford Auto Aviation Museum. Just a little tidbit of information.
I want to drink 40 ounces of beer out of it. You probably won't let me, but I'm going to still dream about that.
It's a lot bigger than 40 ounces, FYI.
Well, I'm a lightweight. I have so much beer I can drink.
Okay.
Drink out of it.
Gotcha.
I mean, beer, he pass it around.
But anyway, back to what we were talking about. Yes, I think we need to bring trials racing to the U.S. because we do have groups that do beach racing, which is awesome. We have hill climbs, right? We have various types of hill climbs as well. We've got your traditional straight line up the steepest hill in town. And then we've also got like the Mount Washington hill climbs and those things. So you've got your actual, road course style up a hill or a mountain hill climbing as well. So, if you really look around at the vintage racing that happens, the one true vintage racing series that America really never had, it never really came over here, is trials racing.
Well, and we should emphasize to the listeners that may not be familiar with this, unlike motorcycle trials, automobile trials is often a lower speed thing. It's about going
yeah,
up
it's
a hill
creeping.
without losing your momentum and not clipping a corner stake. So, and it's about shifting the weight
Or
in
a
the car. So
tree, or
yeah, it's a precision car control thing. It's not a high speed thing. So it's not something you need a roll bar for. It's not something where installing a Y block in your Model A is going to give you a major advantage. It's something you can do with essentially a stock 20s or 30s car at low speed on an improvised course, just where a landowner is willing to let you do it. And probably, frankly, if you're being responsible, where you can get insurance to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's not about speed. It's about momentum and getting as far as you can before you have to come to a stop or roll backward. So,
Mhm.
you know, you don't have to have people that are normally doing higher speed things like hill climbs or beach racing to do it. And in fact, in a lot of ways, those higher strung cars built for a different purpose might be a real disadvantage for it.
Well, I just
Yeah,
came up
I'm all
with
for it. Let's do it. Let's figure out how to do it. Trials
I
racing.
it's not exactly trials racing, but I came up with an idea. If said person that I was just discussing that kind of controls a racing organization that they created themselves and then is approximately an hour and a half away from me, would like to do a special category, minimum of say 5 to 8 cars. We'll work out the details. No Driving Gloves will sponsor between a $500 and $1,000 prize.
Man, I got to get some cars ready. See you guys later.
So no driving gloves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll
we've got to figure out the field size. We'll come up with a reasonable cash prize that maybe we could do every couple of months, and we'll see if those people are interested. And if they're not listening tonight, they should be. Reach out and tell them they need to listen to this podcast.
They might be busy.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're up to tonight.
And as a matter of fact, I actually have two other conversations I need to talk to that guy with. So I'll put that on my list and
throw it out there. We also have the other thing we have going on right now for early cars is the ragtime racers, which are early brass era cars, race cars that hit the track. And they do some dirt track. They also run at some of the paved tracks. As soon as I get the Hupmobile done, I am hopefully going to be a member of the Ragtime Racers. I've been told that once it's done, I will have an invite. So fingers crossed, I'll be involved in that as well. But we need to get some more antique car racing series going here in the U.S. I mean, I love watching the races, especially at the Revival, Goodwood Revival. There's nothing like a good saloon race of Bentley saloons going around the Goodwood track, but we need to be doing it here.
Yes,
we got to make this happen.
Would be a wonderful thing. And it would be interesting too to they do stage rallies too, so you could combine road rally sections with trial sections if you were so inclined.
Yes.
We're gonna trial this venue, and then we're all gonna convoy to this venue. So then you have to have a car that's not only good at that technical aspect of climbing a hill, but also has to be capable of going from one spot to another. That's something I've always appreciated about events like what's the big drag racing circuit series that Hot Rod Magazine puts on? Drag Week, where they drive from course to course, hauling their own stuff. Those cars aren't my cup of tea, but the concept of you've got to have more than just a specialized machine to do well at this series is very, very appealing to me. I've never liked single purpose race cars very well because they get unrelatable to me really quickly. My car club is supposed to be working on a brass racer, actually based around a Continental 7R flathead 6-cylinder from the World War I era. And
nice.
My buddies gathered just loads of brass airplanes. It's got a big white 4-speed to go in it, and I can't even. He shows me all the pictures, and I love seeing it all, but I can't keep track of all the different disparate parts. And he's got a great vision for this thing, and we call it the 7R kind of like our tribute to the Hudson 7X, but since it's a 7R flathead 6 engine, or the Red Seal Special, because Continental's big
Yep.
deal back then was they called their engines the Red Seal because it was their mark of quality. So, and of course, Continental's big plants were in Detroit and Muskegon, and the Muskegon plant outlasted the Detroit plant. And I can recall as a kid seeing it still standing along Lake Muskegon when we first moved to town. It had the big sawtooth roof line and everything, and because it was downtown was where they built the industrial motors that were essentially the stationary version of that flathead 6 car engine.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had Muskegon's original airport was up on a hill just outside of town by the river, and that had actually been taken over by their tank plant because that's where they had their aircraft engine plant during the Second World War, which a lot of Continental radial aircraft engine were used in tanks, Stuart tanks and other things. So Continental eventually became a tank engine manufacturer via their airplane engine line, but that all comes out of their car work in the teens and 20s. So it's a really cool lineage that people don't think about because Continental only had an actual car in, I think, 1933, and that was because
33.
Yeah, they took over a defunct part of the Durant Empire, the second Durant Empire that needed, because I think basically Durant owed them money and they took the plant in lieu of the cash they were owed and tried to make a go of it, but assembled a few cars and said, no, that's not for us. And by that point, supplying car motors to independent makers was drying up because all those places were going out in the Depression anyway.
Mm-hmm. I only know of 2 existing Continentals, 1933 Continentals. One a sedan, which is a friend of mine owns back in Michigan and is, original as it came from factory. And then there is a coupe out there, but it was found in very, very poor condition and it was turned into a hot rod. So that one is just kind of the body of a Continental that is hot rodded. So
yeah, they look temptingly like a 33 Ford or Plymouth. So I can see where they would do that. Plus, imagine if what you started with was truly like a woods found car with all the detail parts missing, and imagine trying to restore that 30 years ago. Still, if you ended up with that car, you could build a really neat but perhaps more Continental themed hot rod out of it. Continental made engines right up. The supercharged Kaiser 6, a Continental design. Actually, Checker taxis used an overhead converted Continental 6. I don't know, when did they start using Chevy engines? In the 60s, I think. So in the 50s and 60s, they were
that sounds right.
A Continental. Gray Marine used Continental 6s. It's such
Continental was a prolific engine. It's like Lycoming of the 1930s, and Continental was already around then too, but everybody, you look at a lot of late 20s, early 30s cars, it's like it's got a Lycoming. You get into the late 30s and into the 40s, it's got a Continental.
Well, Continental was just always associated with like more mundane, robust, serviceable power plants and not glamorous ones. Cords had Lycoming.
Right.
The Duesenberg engine
because who owned Lycoming.
Right. That's why Lycoming has that romance about it and Continental doesn't, because Continental's the stolid. Their biggest aircraft engine produced during World War II was the one that powered the PT-17 biplane primary trainer. It's the plane everybody learned to fly in, but it's not glamorous like a P-51. Because although all those P-51 pilots flew a Stearman, it's the Allison and the Merlin that get all the glory. People don't even talk about the radials that were in the P-47, do they? They're like, it was a liquid cooled war.
Yeah. Well, and I like to go back and, my hope someday is to own a, Willis Overland built Curtiss aircraft engine to put in a Willis Overland chassis and make a, aero engine race car. That's all Willis Overland based.
Is that an OX5? The aircraft?
Yeah, the OX5. Yeah. So Curtiss couldn't build enough. So they contracted Willis Overland to also build OX5 engines. And they have a special plate on them that says Willis. I'm trying to remember if it's Willis Overland on it or what the actual, what they deemed it. But they identify the Willis Overland built engines on the tags. And my whole idea is to have a Willis Overland built OX5 in a period Willis Overland chassis, and it is a aero-engined racer, all Willis Overland based.
Interesting tidbit that I won't remember in 2 weeks, but just read last night or something, is that the going rate for an OX5 engine in 1928 was $250, which was of course a lot more money in 1928 than it is today, but still.
Yeah, they're about 15 to 20,000 now.
Yeah. Briggs Cunningham, of course, we all know who Briggs Cunningham was, the famous, extremely wealthy Playboy racer that went to Le Mans right after World War II. His first exposure to modified automobiles was an uncle of his, I think his mother's brother, who was an interesting guy. He was a doctor, but he was also a Rough Rider who just stayed in the army and served in the Philippines for a while and then came back home. And he had a Dodge Brothers touring car with a Hispano-Suiza aircraft.
Oh, yes.
Can you imagine like this Dodge Brothers stuffed full of big block aircraft engine driving around? I forget, they lived in Ohio at the time. This was before they moved to Connecticut. Driving around this town in Ohio. Of course, being from Michigan, I have to give Ohio a rough time, but it's always been car country. And it's always been modified
100%.
car country. I mean, from speedsters to gassers, Ohioans love to modify their cars, which, it's very flat there. So, I mean, you want to get from one place to another really quickly, I guess is the explanation. And you don't much have to turn corners. So I guess speed is what counts. But,
the western portion is flat. You get over in the east, it actually gets pretty nice.
That's true. It gets
more
mountainous.
Yeah.
There's even coal country in Ohio. That's where our vice president
Yes,
is.
Yeah, the southeast, yeah. So
actually, my
you think back,
emigrated right through there too. They were coal miners.
But you even think back, Detroit, obviously a lot of racing early on going on around Detroit. Boat racing, yeah. But you look at Cleveland, and I mean, so Ohio had some of the greatest race car drivers of the early period in America, because you had Barney Oldfield over from the west in Worcester, Ohio, and then, or not Worcester, it's just off I-75. I'm blanking on where he was from. They have the big steam show every year, and I'm blanking on the name of the town now. Somebody will jump in the comments, I'm sure, and be like, how dare you forget it was this town. But you had Barney Oldfield.
Columbus. We got to name.
No, you're too far. You got to come over to the west corner near Indianapolis, up the top of it.
Dublin.
No, stop. You're going to make me not be able to think of it. But, and then over in Cleveland, you had Alexander Whitten, who was the race car driver of the early 1900s in America. He was, look at October 10th, 1901. Who was favored to win, Henry Ford or Alexander Whitten? Alexander Whitten.
Don't you wish you could go back in time and put a little money on Henry?
I'd put a lot of money on Henry.
And then you buy into his company. And then you'd be
exactly.
Like, buy me out like Malcolmson.
Yeah.
No, buy me out like the Dodge Brothers, but without the acrimony.
The Dodge Brothers, yeah, because I'd want to go start my own company.
Oh,
Wauseon. I had to look it up. Wauseon, Ohio. That's where Barney Oldfield was born. And if anybody's, we're all car guys, right? But so we all like clocks and mechanical things. That's just how we roll. But if you want to see one of the great steam engine shows in America, look up the Wauseon steam show, because it is phenomenal.
I've known many people who have gone to that, and they won't disagree with you.
And you know who loved steam engines was Henry Ford,
He did.
because he spent his teenage years in his early 20s working on them around Dearborn. And didn't he actually track down the steam engine that he worked on as a kid and have it restored, and it's at the Greenfield Village today?
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's in the museum. Yep. The one that he worked on the farm on as a kid. Yep. And then of course from there he went into Detroit and got a job at the Edison Illuminating as an engineer, and worked on the steam. Sorry.
Didn't he go to the Flower Brothers machine shop for a while before he went to Edison?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Little tidbit of, in between information there, but the big part of the Edison story is, of course, that's where he took the scrap steam pipes from to build the engine for the quadricycle. And then, of course, it's how he got the opportunity to meet Thomas Edison at the dinner in New York. And that's what sparked their friendship.
And shall we say that he found himself with a lot of free time on his hands while actually at the substation, and could indulge in some of his fabrication work there as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the steam engines were running fine, what you didn't have much to do as the engineer. You were just there to make sure they were running and doing what they needed to do. So
how close are the turbines and the powerhouse which was his favorite place right later in life, at Fairlane? How close are those to what he would have been managing at turn of the century Detroit?
Well, I think quite a bit different, because you have to remember those were water turbines that were being run by the chute that they built off the Rouge River to come through the powerhouse. It wasn't steam based; it was water turbine based. So, but again, that was all. Well, the generators, yeah. I mean, but to be honest, I don't know how much Henry had to do with the actual electrical generation equipment at Edison Illuminating. He, for the most part, he was there for the steam engines.
Okay,
I'd have to do more research.
Background with the threshing, and the steam engines on the countryside.
Yeah, but yeah, of course, that whole powerhouse at Fairlane was set up by Edison's crew, and then of course the useless information from history that Dave and I are both so good at sometimes would be that one of the ironies of Henry Ford's death, even though he was one of the great Americans who rushed us into an entirely new technological world that he and Edison and so many others were creating at that time. Henry Ford was born by candlelight and died by candlelight, even though he had a complete modern state-of-the-art powerhouse at his mansion. The Rouge River happened to be flooded, and they had to shut the powerhouse down. And the night he died, it was still off with no electricity.
Have you read The Last Days of Henry Ford?
A long time ago.
Yeah, I have it on the shelf, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. Excellent read. Interweaves his last few days of life with, of course, stories about his life that would touch on elements drawn from those days, and discusses in detail the lousy weather that Easter and the flooding and what was going on in the powerhouse. Is really very powerful move. And, reading in detail about anybody's death is interesting. And, I can imagine Henry Ford must have had a lot to ruminate on as he considered his own mortality.
Yeah. And I've read a few of the books about Henry. Is that the one that also discusses a little more in depth his retreat in old age into the village? Is that the book, or is that another one? Yeah. Okay. It is that book.
Well, there might be another one as well, but yes, there's quite a bit of detail about how he essentially was living purely within his little fantasy world.
Yep.
At the end, basically, I think after Henry II kicked out, who was Henry's thug, Harry Bennett.
Harry Bennett. We just talked about him on the show.
We just talked. Well, and it was funny because I was when John brought up Harry Bennett the last time. I was like, "That's a jazz trumpeter, right?"
Hey,
For
well,
crying out
well,
loud.
it wasn't John. It was me. Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it was John.
I thought I could have sworn it was John. Because like John coming out with a Henry Ford fact. That'd be like me
We're
being like,
gonna.
you know what I think the best Japanese sports car of the '80s was.
All right, we're gonna go back to the tape and we're gonna see, because I'm about 100% sure that I'm the one that brought Harry Bennett into the conversation.
All right.
And what a
Well,
good
you
thing for
bring the
you to
receipts
bring up.
next week.
If anybody happened to notice and does subscribe to the audio podcast, I apologize. But John got off his ass this week and worked his butt off. And every
Burn some gas.
podcast we had recorded has been released. And if you don't subscribe to the podcast, hop over to your favorite podcast player and look up No Driving Gloves and give us a follow or a subscribe or whatever your app calls it this week. So got that done this week. And if you are big into this video, hop over to YouTube if you're not already there and hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you're alerted to when we go live, which is normally every Thursday night. Shameless plug.
So
Yes.
yeah,
You guys
as
your
we're wrapping up now, because we're gonna wrap up, because I know Dave's got to get to bed. I got to get to bed. We all got to get to bed. But
I was stay up. I
it
got a
is-
Red Bull here.
yeah, well, that's you. It's February 27th, 2025. There's an auction occurring right now in Miami, Florida. And my question to you two is, if you had an extra $7 million laying around, what would you do with it?
Well, I doubt if they're having an auction right now at 11 o'clock in Miami. If I'm in Miami at 11 o'clock,
Oh, everybody's.
I don't- I- it-
The
and I got
bidding
an
is
extra
just
They-
getting
$7
on the-
bucks, I'm not going to be at
They
an auction.
they started it at 8, and they said they did not have a time constraint. So
Wow.
I think I'd be at South Beach.
What's
Just-
for sale at
so-
this auction?
well, it's the auction where the Indianapolis Motor Speedway cars have gone up for sale.
Oh,
And
my.
the $7 million question being posed, the answer tonight was someone who had an extra $7 million laying around purchased the 1957 Corvette SS that had been built by Zora Arkus Duntov.
Wow. $7 million.
So $7 million.
Well, for me, it would be anything junk formula. I mean, that's my era at Indy is when Cat Meddy said, we need to get the manufacturers back here, so we're gonna incentivize stock block builds. So what was that? 30 to 39-ish, the reintroduction of the riding mechanics and all that jazz. Again, relatability, giant Studebaker Speedster, Pupmobile, whatever. Yeah, that's glorious to me. I don't know if any of
Nice.
those were for sale because I don't follow the auction scene, but
Well, no, Indy to their, and it was brought up at the auction tonight. And I know there's been a lot of questions around it because whenever a museum sells something, everybody has to say that we aren't doing our job right. But
Mhm.
every car that was sold out of the collection had absolutely no connection to Indianapolis Motor Speedway history. So
okay. So then my
Which
usual
anyone listening is how you want to deaccession or remove vehicles from your collection or any object that's in your collection. If it has nothing to do with your mission and what you're there for, get rid of it because it's taking up extra space.
And on that note, we bid you all a wonderful good night.
So is it that time to get off their ass, burn some gas? Because we are out. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.